Dear audience, let me present my PhD topic, which is about the investigation of the optimal mode of delivery of very preterm neonates. My name is Vivien Unger. I'm a PhD student and also a fourth-year pediatric resident at the Csolnoky Ferenc Hospital in Veszprém. My vision is to provide the highest quality of care to the very preterm infants, and for this my mission is to find the optimal mode of delivery for them and to provide timely and accurate data about periviable infants in Hungary. I have two projects ongoing. In the first one, we are curious about how the mode of delivery affects the mortality rates of very preterm infants. In the second one, we are going to do a registry analysis, which is based on the characteristics and outcomes of periviable infants in Hungary. So let me start with the first one. Approximately 15 million babies are born preterm annually worldwide, indicating a global preterm birth rate of about 11%. Very preterm neonates who are born before the 32nd gestational week are at high risk for death, medical complications, and neurodevelopmental sequelae. It has long been a hot topic in perinatal medicine to find the optimal mode of delivery for them because it can affect their outcomes and the long-term consequences, although this is still not known. The rate of caesarean section varies greatly across the world, and we still don't know whether it has beneficial effects or not. Some studies suggested that C-section might decrease the incidence of intravaginal hemorrhage, although during C-section some complications might arise. Delayed neonatal lung liquid absorption, neonatal gut dysbiosis, and higher rates of maternal morbidity and subsequent preterm birth rates are known as complications of C-section, although during prolonged birth asphyxia may occur, which is a known risk factor for intraventricular hemorrhage. Therefore, our aim was to assess the effect of C-section on mortality and on the early morbidities. Here I would like to highlight the two definitions that I'm going to use in the upcoming slides, the difference between the actual and the planned mode of deliveries. To formulate our clinical question, we use the PICO framework. We are investigated very preterm neonates born before the 32nd gestational week. We compare the actual or planned C-section and vaginal birth. According to our hypothesis, very preterm infants born by a C-section have lower mortality rates and lower early morbidities. We ran a systematic search in the three main databases last year, November, and after the thorough search, we found 19 eligible articles to include in our meta-analysis. And let's see our results. I would like to highlight that in this slide and in the upcoming ones, as a measure of effect, we used odds ratio. If odds ratio is 1, it means that there is no difference between the effect of the two groups. If odds ratio is below 1, so the study is situated on the left side of the line, babies who are born via C-section have lower mortality rates or the rates of early outcomes. If odds ratio is above 1, so the study is situated on the right side of the line, the babies who were born by vaginal birth have lower mortality rates. Here you can see that odds ratio is 0.95. It might suggest us that there is no difference between the two groups, but the heterogeneity was high. Therefore, we have made a subgroup analysis based on the parity and on the presentation of the pregnancies. And here you can see one of our main results. In the first 4 articles, we included only breech articles. Odds ratio is 0.56, which means that among those babies who are born by C-section, there is almost a 50% decrease in the odds of death than among those babies who are born by vaginal birth. This is a clinically and a statistically significant result. In case of twin pregnancies, we found that babies who are born by vaginal birth might have lower odds of death. This is a clinically significant result, although this is at the burden of mathematical significance. In case of singleton pregnancies, according to the planned birth, we didn't find any clinically or mathematically statistically significance between the two groups. In this plot, we collected data from the occurrence of severe intraventricular hemorrhage. Here you can see that according to the planned mode of delivery, there is no difference between the occurrence of severe intraventricular hemorrhage in the two groups. Although, if we analyze the data based on the actual mode of delivery, so we included studies who collected data only from the actual mode of delivery, we found significant difference between the two groups. Namely, we found that babies who born via C-section have almost 40% smaller chance of intraventricular hemorrhage than among babies who born by a vaginal birth. I would like to highlight here that in the first plot you can see these results, although this is for the cases for all grades of IVH. Although if we analyze the data based on the severe brain damage collecting grade 3 and 4 IVH and cystic periventricular leukomalacia, we didn't find any significant difference between the two groups. Here you can see our main findings collected in a huge table. I just would like to highlight that in case of breech pregnancies, we found both in the actual mode and both in the planned mode a significant decrease in the odds of death. I collected here the recent guidelines and our findings. According to the whole population, the recommendation says that only if there is any kind of fetal or maternal comprise should be done a C-section. We found the same. Although in case of breech pregnancies, this is the same in the guidelines. Although we found a significant decrease in the odds of death. Therefore, we suggest the revision of the current guidelines in case of breech pregnancies. Although in case of twin pregnancies, not enough data is available in the literature. Therefore, there are no more prospective studies are needed. Here I'm at the manuscript status. We are planning to send it for internal review this week or in the next week. And let me talk about the second project, which is about the characteristics of periviable infants in Hungary. The definition of the limit of viability is based on the ability of the fetus to survive outside the womb when supported by the most advanced medical care. There has been a change over time in the limit. In the 1980s, it was around the 28th gestational week. Meanwhile, 40 years later, it decreased to the 22nd, 24th gestational week. The gray zone is set between two boundaries. The lower one is the limit under the babies barely survive. The other limit is where most of the babies survive, and most of the survivors have a good quality of life. We have to know, based on our own data, where is this limit to provide timely and accurate data for our healthcare providers and for the parents. So what are the chances for these babies? Therefore, we are going to make a registry analysis based on the Hungarian NICU database. We are planning to analyze a 10-year-long period, and we hypothesized that over time, we were able to improve in the management of these periviable infants. Here you can see my two ongoing projects. We are planning to submit the first one in September, and after we are going to start the analysis in the second project. Let me finish my presentation with a quote from Dante Alighieri, "From Lily's spark may burst a flame." Thank you.
I would like to understand what are the differences between the actual mode of delivery and planned.
Thank you for your question. Due to the lack of time, I couldn't be more precise to tell that, but there is a difference. So in case of actual mode of delivery, we analyze the data according when the baby was born by a C-section or vaginal birth. It's pretty easy and simple. In case of planned mode of delivery, let's take planned vaginal birth. So in the beginning of the labor, or in the beginning or at the time of the decision making, whether it is safe to go for a vaginal birth or they have to do a C-section, it's equal. So at that time, they could go for a vaginal birth because it's safe enough, or just to do a C-section on the maternal purpose or obstetrical reasons. But after time, if something happens during labor, for example, a bleeding occurs, or there is any kind of maternal or fetal comprise, they have to do an emergency C-section. In case of planned vaginal birth, those cases are counted together when there is a vaginal birth, so it was done, and the emergency C-section cases. And that's why the IVH cases the results were so different in the plots, because in case of the planned one, there were emergency C-section cases in the vaginal birth. Meanwhile, in the actual mode, the emergency C-section cases were included in the actual C-section cases. And just imagine when there's something happens during labor, for example, a bleeding or a drop in the heart rate of the baby, it suggests us that there is something wrong with the baby or the mother, and the chances of a good start are lower. So maybe these are the distortion.
I would like to have a question regarding your first project. Is there any meta-analysis, previous meta-analysis written, and what was the results of it? Do you have a knowledge about that?
Yes, of course, there are meta-analyses available in the literature. Regarding breech pregnancies, there is one meta published in 2018, and they found a similar results, so almost 50% change in the odds of death. Although there is another meta-analysis published 2 months ago, they were doing almost the same as we did, but they didn't take into account the selection bias that we did. So they included high-risk pregnancies, we included only low-risk pregnancies to eliminate selection bias. But in case of breech pregnancies, they found the same.
Regarding your second topic, I was wondering how common this is in Hungary. So about how many periviable infants are born yearly here in Hungary?
As far as I know, there are around 150 to 200 periviable infants in Hungary.